NFL Week 13, so it's time to get into it and make some more picks for this weekend. This week we got 6 bye teams. We already had Thursday night football, so that leaves 11 games this weekend, plus the Monday nighter between Cincinnati and Jacksonville. To recap last week, our 2 parlays went 2-0, bringing us to 13-9 on the season. If it's not broke, let's not try to fix it, so let's keep rolling with 2 more parlays. Just trying to be very simple here, picking easy outcomes. Now, each week, I seem to find a theme with my bets. Some weeks it seems to be a good week for moneyline parlays. Maybe it could be teasing teams games on the under, since we've seen such low scoring this year. It could be taking both teams to score 10 or more points. I've done that a lot. Sometimes it's multiple teams to score over 1.5 touchdowns. This week, I think the theme is alternate spreads. I see a lot of small to mid favorites that seem to me had to have good value if you can flip them into small underdogs in the alternate spread markets. Now, which ones? Well, I'll get into it in a second. But while you're listening, please give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, give a comment in the comments about what you're betting, all that good stuff. It all helps the channel to grow. So let's get into parlay number 1 for this weekend in NFL Week 13. I'm going to the Broncos and the Texans. Now, Stroud, he threw for 304 yards and 2 touchdowns last week. That's his 4th straight game going over 300 yards, and it's the 3rd time in 4 games he's thrown for multiple scores. In that 4-game stretch, he's thrown for 1,466 yards and 10 touchdowns. The Broncos are improving, and Russell Wilson has been good, not great, but he has a passing touchdown in every game this season, but only 4 in his last 3 games, and has only thrown for 200 yards once in the last 7 games. Denver has also been aided by ridiculous turnover luck in their current 5-game winning streak. Denver has a plus 13 turnover differential. In those 5 recent wins, 38% of their points scored have been set up from those turnovers, and that is just not a sustainable way to keep winning games. I think Houston could win this game. They're short home favorites here at -3 or -3.5. So I think they could be a good money line bet on their own. But I could also see Denver covering the +3 or the +3.5, depending where you're shopping. They could certainly pull the upset. They have won 5 in a row, and Houston does, turn the ball over themselves sometimes. So maybe that turnover luck does continue for Denver. But Houston does score 23.5 points per game, which is 10th, and they've scored 2 or more touchdowns in every game this season since week 1. I think that should be the safest bet here to start off this parlay. It's just Houston to score over 1.5 touchdowns. I also think you could tease either team, and you could make Houston a dog as well easily by flipping them in the alternate spreads, considering Denver's wins this season have only come by 3, 2, 15, 2, and 1 points, and then 17 last week, but they were playing that combination of DTR and PJ Walker in Cleveland. So even if Denver does get this win, it's probably not going to be by a lot. So if you wanted to tease Houston into an underdog, that could work, but I am just going to go Houston to score at least 2 touchdowns to kick off this parlay. Next up, it's the Lions and the Saints. Now, both teams are off losses here. Detroit has the extra rest, though, as they played on Thanksgiving. The Lions have bounced back after their previous losses this season, winning 20-6 after losing 37-31 to Seattle, and then winning 26-14 after losing 38-6 to Baltimore. They're also 5-0 ATS in their next game following a loss dating back to last season. So they very well could cover the 4 points they're favored by on the road here. The Saints have been getting run all over lately, including giving up almost 200 yards, 198 last week, to the Falcons on the ground. The Lions should be able to take a similar approach this week when you factor in they have David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, who should be able to run the ball against this team. Derek Carr in the Saints offense is struggling. Carr himself has not thrown a touchdown pass in either of his last 2 games, and the Saints were 0-5 in the red zone last week. They were also one of the worst red zone scoring teams this season. Their injuries just keep piling up as well. They already have wide receiver Michael Thomas on the IR. They have cornerback Marshawn Lattimore on defense on the IR. And this week, wide receiver Chris Olave could also miss out as he's in concussion protocol. I trust the Lions to bounce back here, but the Saints' defense is 12th in yards allowed per game. They could keep them in this game. They are at home, and sometimes, rarely, the offense does come to life with Carr and Kamara and others. But I do think it is a good spot for Detroit. But just in case, we can play this safe and go Lions plus 4.5. So I just need them not to lose by likely more than a field goal. Chargers and Patriots are next. The Chargers are 4-7, and week in, week out, they just keep charging things up and finding ways to lose. Still, they do have wins this season when they do win of 4, 7, 17, and 21 points. So they possibly could cover the 5.5 or so points they are favored by right here in this game. But for me, this is just a big fade of the Patriots. No matter how often the Chargers find ways to lose, the Patriots are just 2-9, and they have one of the worst quarterback combinations in the league right now with Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi, or if they decide to throw out Will Grier. It doesn't matter. They all suck. Last week, Jones was 12 for 21 for 89 yards, 2 interceptions. Zappi was 9 of 14 for 54 yards and 1 interception. Versus the Giants, that was in a 10-7 loss. They're the league's 26th ranked defense, so they couldn't even score against the Giants. The week prior, they lost 10-6 to Indianapolis. That's the league's 27th ranked defense. So only twice this season has a team held an opponent to 10 points or less and still managed to lose. Both of those games were the Patriots, and both came in the last 2 weeks. So it's not like just because the Chargers also have a poor defense that could necessarily change things for the Patriots and they'll get more points. In fact, the Chargers' defense is 23rd, so it's technically better than the Giants and the Colts. So they're not getting any worse of a matchup here. The Patriots average 13.5 points per game. That's 31st. And the Chargers are averaging 24.5 points per game, which is 8th. Last week, Chargers did score only 10 points, but that was against one of the league's top teams in the Ravens. Prior to that, they scored 20, 38, 27, and 30 in their games prior. If the Chargers put up anything like that this week, I don't know how the Patriots can match that. So I do think the Chargers could win. They possibly could cover. I certainly don't think they're going to lose by more than 4. Chargers plus 4.5. Dolphins and Commanders to round out this 4-leg parlay. Miami beats bad teams, and Washington is, guess what, another bad team. They're 4-8, and they were just routed by Dallas on Thanksgiving, 45-10. Sam Howell does still lead the league, though, in passing yards, with Tua being 5th, so this possibly could turn into a shootout. However, there's cold weather and rain in the forecast, so that could muck up the field and slow down the offenses for not only Miami, but possibly Washington as well. Whether you're looking at props or just passing matchups, though, to attack, this does look like the clear best passing matchup of Week 13, with the Dolphins' #1 passing offense going up against the Commanders' 30th ranked passing defense. Opposing quarterbacks versus the Commanders have thrown for multiple touchdowns in 9 of 12 games this season. So if the weather's not too terrible, Tua should have a good game. Miami defense is also improving lately. They have 9 turnovers and 14 sacks in the last 4 games. So even on that aspect, Sam Howell could be in for a long day. Miami money line, Miami in teasers, but in case could be good bets on their own. Or if you want to do a money line parlay, Miami in the parlay, Miami tease, you could tease them down to maybe a field goal. But in case somehow Sam Howell does go off and the weather does slow down Miami somehow, once again, like I said, alternate spread market here. Miami plus 4.5. I don't see the Commanders beating anybody by a big margin. So this parlay is Houston over 1.5 touchdowns, Detroit plus 4.5, Chargers plus 4.5, Miami plus 4.5. That comes in at -118 odds. So all we're hoping for is Stroud to get at least 2 touchdowns over anyone on Houston, and 3 other teams just not to get blown out, and they're all favored in their games. Parlay number 2, we're going into the later games on the day on Sunday. It's 49ers and Eagles, one of the most anticipated games of the season. It's a rematch of the NFC Championship game. Revenge will be on the minds for San Fran as they lost to the Eagles last year in this game, 31-7. That came with Brock Purdy getting knocked out of the game early, though, through injury. Purdy is in this time around. He's 8-3 straight up. He's riding a 3-game winning streak coming into this game as well. Now, since those 3 losses that San Francisco and Purdy suffered, they came out of the bye week, and San Francisco was won 34-3 against Jacksonville, 27-14 against Tampa Bay, 31-13 against Seattle. All double-digit wins, so they've looked great, and that 3-game slide was probably an anomaly on the season, given that they had some injuries to deal with. Purdy has 7 touchdown passes in his last 3 games, and nearly 3 300-yard-plus games in his last 4. One of them, he was 296, so they're almost 300. And look, the Eagles are an NFL best 10-1 straight up. They're also an ATS best 7-2-2, and they've just beaten the Chiefs and Bills in recent weeks. But that Bills game last week went deep into overtime in bad weather, and it saw the Eagles defense on the field for over 90 snaps in a wild 37-34 game. That defense also currently sees each of Jordan Davis, Fletcher Cox, and Zach Cunningham questionable with injuries for Sunday. But even the offense is walking wounded a little bit right now. A.J. Brown was limited in practice this week with a thigh injury. Tight end Dallas Goedert is still doubtful to return this week as well. 49ers, they should be able to attack this Eagles secondary that's ranked just 29th. They just got torched by the Bills last week for 332 passing yards with each of Gabe Davis, who had 105, Stephon Diggs, 74, James Cook, 57, all going over 50 yards. And there was almost another player going who had at least 50 yards in Khalil Shakur, who had 47. Now, you can't count out Philly here. Jalen Hurts is 26-2 straight up in his last 28 starts. But Philly has been outgained in each of their past 4 games, and I think that just may finally catch up to them here. I'm not against the San Francisco win by itself. San Francisco could also possibly cover the 3 points or 2.5 ATS if you're betting this traditionally, but I certainly don't think they get blown out here. We can go San Francisco plus 7.5, so just don't lose by more than a touchdown here in the alternate spread market. I'm going to do the same thing with the Browns and the Rams and flip the Rams into also a plus 7.5 underdog. They are right now in that 3 to 4 point range as a favorite. Now at full strength, the Browns would probably be the play here, but they are certainly not at full strength. Amari Cooper, Wyatt Teller, Myles Garrett, Anthony Walker Jr., Denzel Ward, and Juan Thornhill are all questionable this week on their injury report. But that's not really even the biggest question. The biggest question here is who is starting at quarterback for the Browns. It's not Deshaun Watson. It's not P.J. Walker. It may not even be DTR, who's not great either, but he's in concussion protocol. It may be good old Joe Flacco signed off the street this week. Now, he does have history with the Jets, so maybe he does still know the playbook, and maybe he can get something going in one brief appearance here. But he doesn't have great history with the Jets. He's actually 1-10 straight up in his last 11 career starts. And while the Cleveland defense is elite, they're 7th in points per game allowed, they also have some glaring differences between being at home and being on the road. Cleveland at home is 5-1, and they've allowed 3, 17, 0, and 10 points. On the road, they're 2-3, and they've given up 26, 38, 24, 31, and 29 points. Now, if they give up anything like that to a Rams team that scores 21.1 points per game, which is 16th, it's hard to imagine DTR or Flacco, whoever goes out there, keeping pace. The Rams may not score 37 points again like they did against a terrible Arizona team last week. But Stafford should put the Rams in a position to probably win this game, probably cover the normal spread, certainly cover plus 7.5, Rams plus 7.5 on the alternate spread. Next, we're going to the Sunday night football game. It's Chiefs and Packers. This is not an elite Kansas City offense right now, but they do still have wins this season of 8, 31, 3, 7, 11, 14, 7, and 14 points. So they're favored by about 6 points here, and they certainly could cover that number. Last week, they beat the Raiders 31-17 after being down 14-0. So, like I said, they certainly are capable of putting it in gear and scoring some points and covering larger numbers. They're not generally known to do so, but capable of it. Green Bay just went into Detroit. They pulled off a huge 29-22 upset. They've now won 2 straight, 3 of 4, so you can't count them out either. Jordan Love is also heating up right now. He's thrown for 289, 322, and 268 yards in his last 3 games to go with 2 and 3 touchdowns in those games. These are 2, though, top 10 defenses here in points per game allowed. Both have been under teams this season as well. KC's 8-3 to the under. Green Bay is 6-5. KC's 6-1 to the under of late. Green Bay is 5-2 to the under of late. KC, though, they also can't score in the second half. Generally, they average the second fewest points per second half this season. They got some points last week against the Raiders, but prior to that, they had not scored in the second half for 3 games. That all adds up to maybe another close game here and maybe another under. In fact, primetime unders are 25-3 on Sunday night and Monday night football combined. KC, though, they're only 2-4 ATS in their last 6 away games when they're favored by 6 or more points. They generally don't blow teams out, so taking them to cover in this game could be a risky play. They are, though, 17-1 straight up in December, so a moneyline bet in a parlay certainly does look much better. What looks even better, though, KC plus 4.5 in case they go into a cold Lambeau and struggle. I don't think they're going to lose by more than 4. KC plus 4.5 will be the third leg. Then we will round this out on Monday Night Football. I think this doesn't need a whole ton of explaining here. We've made it to Monday Night Football. Surely the schedule makers, they expected a better match here. They were likely expecting a Joe Burrow and Trevor Lawrence matchup. Instead, we're getting a Jake Browning and Trevor Lawrence matchup. Browning went 19 for 26 for 227 yards, 1 touchdown and 1 interception last week in a 16-10 home loss to the Steelers. Now Pittsburgh, they finally outgained an opponent for the very first time all season, and they also broke a 44-game streak, failing to produce 400 yards of offense. And Kenny Pickett also had a season-high 278 yards passing. So it's not just Browning that's concerning. This Cincy defense is also bad, ranking 26th in passing D, 29th in rushing D. The Jags are 8-3. They score 23.1 points per game, which is 12th. They're 13th in yards per game. They're 12th in passing yards per game, and they're 18th in rushing yards per game. If they are, in fact, a legitimate contending team this season, this should be an easy win. They probably could even cover the 9 points. They certainly should just win on the money line, which will round out our parlay. We'll go Jags to win on the money line with Chiefs plus 4.5, Rams plus 7.5, 49ers plus 7.5. That comes in at minus 110 odds. Now, I've been very safe with those alternate spread numbers. Certainly, if you wanted to not be as safe, maybe you could change that to just plus 4.5 or plus 3.5, or even just some of those teams just to win if you really wanted to bump that up. It's just a strategy I like to take of being extremely safe, since most of these games we really don't know what's going to happen. So 2 parlays, 8 games, near even money for both. Let's win some money this weekend, everybody. Let me know what you're betting in the comments down below. Whatever your picks are, though, good luck in the NFL this weekend.